This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. Hide it under a bushel, no, I'm gonna let it shine. Hide it under a bushel, no, I'm gonna let it shine. Hide it under a bushel, no.
My upbringing prepared me for base. God knew the plan and used my past, good or bad, to prepare me for the future that He set before me. I'm going to tell you a bit of my childhood, which were seeds that were planted to prepare me for my journey with base. My father left my mother when I was 2 years old, and my sister was 8. My mother was thrown into single parenthood in the 50s. It was very uncommon, and it was looked down upon. My mother was also a very beautiful woman. Tall, dark, beautiful green eyes. So I grew up with a single mom. I grew up with a father that wasn't really involved in my life. He saw me once every other weekend, and it wasn't a fun time. I had a stepmother, I had a stepsister, and I was the blonde-haired, blue-eyed wonder, so to speak. The rest of my family was very dark hair, dark eye, and dark complected. So comments were made to me constantly about, where'd you come from? Did the milkman come visit? Who are you? Well, there's no way you could be a Steinheimer. And I heard it all the time. So I heard it from the time I was 2 until the time my father was no longer a part of my life. And those are all seeds that were planted in my life. I didn't agree with those seeds. I didn't like those seeds, but they were planted. You know, we don't always get good seed planted. Talk to a farmer. When he goes out and plants his field, not every seed is gonna come up to grow. Doesn't happen. So the seeds that are planted in our lives are not always the good seed, but we have a choice. And we can turn that seed around. And you have to remember, my mother was not a Christian. I did not hear about God until I was about 12 years old. We didn't go to church. The only time I really heard about God was in cursing. And my mother ran a tight ship. She was a single mom. I'm going to give you a little bit of her past. She was single, so she went to work for Steak and Shake on 3rd shifts. I was 2, my sister was 10. She couldn't afford a babysitter, so we stayed at home by ourselves. Another seed planted in me for base, because many of the parents can't afford daycare. So my mother, being a driven woman and speaking faith words over us long before she knew it was faith words, she would say to us, we are not going to be poor forever. This is a season in our life. My mom, working at Steak and Shake, then met an attorney. And he was an older man, and kind of felt sorry, I think, for my mom. So he asked her, hey, Lil, do you know shorthand? And my mother, being the woman she could be, looked at him and said, sure, I know shorthand. Well, she didn't have a clue. So she came home, and I don't remember this, but rumor has it that my mom talked to my sister and said, I can do shorthand, I'll just do my own. So my mom worked as a secretary in the attorney's office, which in time became pretty important in her life because my dad filed for divorce. And my mom obviously couldn't afford an attorney, so this attorney was helped her with her divorce. So those are all things that God put there for my mom. And she didn't give credit to God. My mom's past was she came from a Holy Roller church. I don't know if you've ever heard that or not. So she hated it. She did not like the church. She didn't enjoy. She was the only one of 12 siblings that wouldn't go up and roll, as she used to say. She said, looks like dogs doing tricks. So she always thought people went home and just practiced, jumping over that sibling and jumping over this one. So she said, she vowed that we were not going to grow up in that church. And she just, her walk with God, it just didn't matter to her at that time. My mother had a lot of drive. She was driven to get out of Southern Illinois. She was driven to not be poor. She came from a poor father. Again, she spoke out several times to my sister and to myself that we won't be poor forever. This is a season. Another seed planted, because I tell my base parents, this is a season. You won't be poor forever. And I believe that with them. So another seed was planted into my life. My mother found a job about 6 years later at Caterpillar. She worked for payroll, and she worked there actually until she retired. Again, my mother, she had a budget. She kept on that budget, and she believed in that budget. Pretty much how we grew up, my sister and myself. Even when we had a little extra money, she still stayed with that budget. Another seed planted for base, because with base, I have to stay on budget. I have to know how to make that dollar stretch. And God gave me the wisdom to be able to do that because He used my mom. I grew up with that. So my mom planted seeds of determination and drive in me, preparing me once again for base. Another seed that was planted. Many times with base, it was difficult. I had to believe that God was going to take care of finances. Rob and I had to believe that God was going to take care of certain situations that arose. So I didn't know it at the time, had no idea about base, but all these seeds were planted in my life. I saw my dad, as I had said, every other weekend. He put lots of doubt in my life. I did not have a good relationship with him. And again, another seed that was planted for base. Many of our children do not have good relationships with their father or their mother. And so it's one thing to say to somebody, I get it, I understand. But it's really another thing when you've walked in their shoes. And I have. And again, through all of that, And all those seeds, whether good or bad, God used it. And he turned it around because, you see, he knew me in the womb.
That's right.
And he prepared me for the future of Base. The wedge with my father grew bigger and deeper. My mom would say to me, I cried every time, Mom, I don't want to go. I don't want to go. And imagine me crying. I was still like that when I was little. And my mom would say, until you can say to your father that you don't want to go, you're going. And I used to think, oh, that's so mean. Why would you do that? I never said that because you didn't talk like that to my mom. So, but I kept it inside. I didn't talk to my mom about the stuff that my dad said either, or my stepmom or my stepsister about where did I come from. I just kept it deep. And that's another seed for Base. I know what it's like to keep a secret. I know what it's like to hurt because of that secret. Many of my parents have had to keep secrets, have had to keep it deep, unable to bring it up. And God used that. Not necessarily a good thing for me. It's not, I don't believe, a good thing to keep pushing things down, but I got really good at it. My mother, when I was 12, my mother met a man from Caterpillar, and great guy. When I was 13, he adopted me. So my biological father gave me up for adoption. So my name was no longer Steinheimer. It got changed to Beckers, which was much easier to spell. My stepfather was not a warm, loving man, certainly, but I finally felt normal. I finally felt like I have a dad, I have a mom, and we're not poor. We weren't poor even back when my mom was working, but at Caterpillar. But I had that mindset because that's kind of how I grew up. So he adopted me at 13, and I grew up with a father that, for the first time, I went to church. So at 12 years old, my stepfather took me to church. He took me to Grace Presbyterian Church in Peoria. It was a huge church. I was in awe. And I was amazed. I heard God. I heard Jesus. I saw people coming in. I saw people accepting Christ into their life. I was amazed at the environment that I was in. So Grace Presbyterian, my stepfather, was the person that really got me into church. And I am so thankful that my mom married him, because that brought me to where I am today also. I don't know what would have happened. I'm sure if it's in God's plan, God would have found another way. But I was thankful. I went away to college, and I went to Bryan College in Tennessee, and that was just way too southern for me. They did the whole rebel stance, and we watched all these things, and I felt like I was an outsider again. So I remember calling home, talking to my stepdad, and said, I don't want to be here. I'm an outsider. I don't like being here. And he said, stick it out for a year. Just stick it out, and you can transfer to any college you want. So I stuck it out and did lots of praying. Another seed planted for base. Seed of determination that no matter what the situation looks like, I was going to stay there and I was going to get through it. So I transferred and stayed 2 years at Trinity College. I was in the classroom, or I was in the dorm, and I remember this like it was yesterday, sitting, getting ready for school, and the dorm, the hallway, the phone rang. That was when you didn't have cell phones. So you called in this dorm and you had to talk with everybody there. And so my mother called me and she said, "Gayle, I have some bad news." And I was quiet, and she said, "I'm going to divorce your father." I cannot tell you the emotion that I felt at that time. I was shocked. I started crying, and in my mind, normalcy just blew out the window. I felt at that time, I'm going back down the same darn trail. And I remember saying to my mom, what happened? I'm so sorry. And she said, "I can't talk about it right now, but I'll call you in a few days." So once again, because I got to be so good at it, I hid it. I didn't talk. Didn't tell my roommates. Didn't say anything. And I kept it in. And about 2 days later, my mother called and she said, "Gayle, are you in an area where there's not going to be a lot of people around?" And I said, "Well, Mom, I'm in the dorm hallway with about 150 girls." And she said, "Well, let me call at a time that will be easier for us to talk." So I agreed. She called me about 10 o'clock at night. The dorm was pretty quiet at that time. And she said to me, "I have some alarming news." And my first thing was, she's pregnant. I mean, what the heck? That's all I could think of. That's all I could think of. And so I said, "Mom, you can tell me anything, anything at all." And she said, "Well, this is difficult for me to say, and it's going to be very difficult for you to accept." She said, "Your father is a homosexual." So this is the time. Honestly, I didn't know a whole lot about homosexuality, and I was in total shock. And so I just said, "What do you mean? You've been married to him for 8 years. What do you mean?" She said, "I knew there were problems from the beginning, but I just kept them to myself." My family is really good at keeping things to themselves. So another seed was planted of deception. And I understand that about my base parents. So many of them have had to lie, whether it's a job, whether it's school, whether it's with DCFS that, tragically gets involved. They have to lie sometimes. I don't agree with it. I know God can take that around, but you know what? For an unbeliever, that's the only way they can make it. So I don't give condemnation. And I don't feel like that's me. That's part of my thing. I don't judge. So I said to my mom, "Okay, well, we'll just go on and we'll get through this." And I mean, this is kind of funny, but honestly, I went and looked it up in Webster's dictionary because I didn't know what the heck it was. You know, homosexual, you know, I was just not real sure because you never heard of it. I didn't hear about it in church. I never heard about it. So I looked it up, and I remember thinking, my gosh, that is my dad? And it was difficult. About 2 weeks, and I was in denial. Again, I didn't tell my friends. I didn't say anything to anyone. I didn't talk to my sister about it. I kept it inside. And I was out of sorts. I just trying to deal with stuff, knowing, plus going to college and trying to figure out what my life goal was going to be. I was a procrastinator. I'll just put it like that. I had a paper due. And so I went to the library, and as being a procrastinator, hadn't done anything on the darn paper at all. And I was in the library. It was about 9 o'clock. The library closed, and I went to the library assistant, and I said, would you care if I stayed later, and I'll just shut the door behind me? And she said, that's fine, you know, you can lock up. So I agreed, got my paper finished in 2 hours, and I came out of the library. I turned to make sure, you know, that door was locked. And when I did, there was somebody behind me that actually assaulted me, hit me, you know, on the back of the head. My head went into the glass, and he sexually assaulted me. I have no memory, you know, of that at all. I think God did that to me and just, you know, let me get out of that. I don't remember anything. So another seed was planted. Many of my parents have been sexually assaulted. I don't believe that God did that, but I believe he used it. I believe he turned that horrible, nasty tragedy into the ability to be able to talk to other women. I have to tell you, when Base first started, I had not told anybody. I remember I grew up with being able to hide lots of stuff. And so I didn't talk to people about any of that for 20 years. So in the meantime, I just kept keeping it down deep, and I was not willing at that point in time. I wasn't ready to talk about it. I just kept it deep. So another part of our family, we were very good at keeping and running. I couldn't talk to my mom. The only person that knew about it, other than the person that found me, he was a seminary student. I knew him, and so he found me, and he took me to another. Actually, I watched some children that were actually, the family was part of the mafia, to be honest, and he took me there. So they took care of me. I was out of school for about a week, and he took care of me, and I made him promise, I don't want anybody to know this. So because I was hiding from my mother, Thanksgiving I went to my sister's, and at Christmas I begged my sister, not telling her, but begged her to come up, because I knew my mother was very intuitive, and so I knew that she would know, and I wasn't really good yet at keeping it to myself, you know, as far as pushing it down. I was still emotional about the situation. So I never told my mom or my sister or anyone. Again, I was running. There was a mission trip that I took into Brazil. I spent 3 months in Brazil, and basically it was a great trip. It helped me hide more, helped me keep everything inside just a little bit better. So I came back, and at that point in time in my life, I had it so hidden and so deep, it didn't happen. And again, another seed was planted because so many of my parents keep everything so deep that it never happened. And I know what it's like. I met Rob. First I kind of went down a wild turn. My grades plummeted. I went down some wrong paths, and I knew that I didn't want to continue down this path. And I knew some things had to change. Rob came into my life. God. Yeah, AKA. That's right. That's right. And so we met each other at the Poison Apples. Anybody remember that place? Yeah. So I met him there, and we joke about this. He was such a hunk. Yeah, you were. Yes. And I was such a beauty. We danced. We were dancing. It was our first dance, and actually he had his eyes on another girl that I was with, and so he kind of was scooting that way, and I kind of was scooting this way because his roommate, I thought he had beautiful blue eyes, and I thought he was pretty hot, but it didn't work. His roommate went to get drinks, and Rob scooped in. Probably didn't hurt because I was wearing a low neck top. You might want to delete that. And so I was instantly in love. And my life, I knew, was going to change. He met my mom. He was the only person that my mom liked. In fact, she loved him. I always said she probably loved him more than me. She loved him. First time she met him, Rob had an old clunker and pulled up in our drive, which had a little bit of an incline. And he forgot his reverse didn't work. So the first thing he did, we walked out and he goes, can we take your car? I looked at him, and my mom heard it too. And he goes, and my reverse doesn't work. I'll push and you drive. And if you knew my mom, again, poor was not in her vocabulary, but she didn't care. It was just like, it didn't matter. You know, she loved Rob, and when I came back from that date, she said to me, Gayle, he's it. He's it. And I said, you think so? And she said, I do. I do. So Rob and I met in September. We met in September, and we were married September of '78, and we were married in July of 1979. So it was very, very quick, and I wasn't pregnant, just tell you. It took me 3 years to have her. So I just felt so good. Things were great. It was wonderful. We had 3 children. It was fantastic. But about 10 to 12 years into our marriage, I started having panic attacks. And it was getting worse and worse. And I went to a counselor who was a friend of mine, and he said to me, "Gayle, you're hiding something. Something's not right. What are you hiding?" And of course, nothing. What do you mean? I don't know. This just came upon me. And I think I know that when we're trying to hide things from God, things start festering because He doesn't want us. He knows what we've been through. He knows what happened. He didn't agree with it. I always say, and I tell my parents that have been through the same situation, God's crying right along with you. He didn't want that to happen. And so it just kept festering. And I had gotten so good at not accepting the fact. I was great. I just kept saying, no, didn't happen. I don't know. Well, it got worse. I went to the emergency room probably 3 times. Faith Newhouser. I was at OSF, and I was crying out in the parking lot. And she actually saw me, and she came out, and I told her, I said, I don't know, I think I'm having a heart attack. And anyway, to make a very long story short, it was one of 3 times that this happened. And I still wasn't ready to face it. Base starts after a difficult time of my work. I didn't care for it. For about 6 years, I loved it. And then I got transferred, and I didn't like it. It was at District 709. I didn't care for the principal, and I was just unhappy, and there was a lot of unrest. God was working on me. He knew that that's not what I should be doing, because see, all these seeds were planted, and He wanted them to be used for His glory. So it started. I went to Rob. We talked about it. We knew it was going to be an expense. Rob made pretty good money. I made pretty good money. So together, we thought, okay, this'll work. This was before my faith walk. Just going to tell you, I didn't know anything about it, other than Rob saying, look at the budget. Or is this going to be doable? Yes, it is. Drive and determination, seeds my mother set in me. Yes, it'll work. So I quit my job. I started working at preparing for base, and in that time, it started in 1998, December of 1998. Base opened its doors in December of 1998. We started working on it, and in August of 1999, Base opened its doors. Lots of problems, lots of things going on, but I just kept going forward. Rob didn't, he was behind me, but he was busy working, and he just said, if this is something that you want, then we'll go with it. Go forward. Okay, that's all I needed. So I went forward, worked through some stuff, that drive and determination that my mother, those seeds that she had planted in me, it was going. And there wasn't going to be anything that was going to stop it. Again, I was a Christian. I prayed. I didn't do daily devotions. I didn't have a faith walk. But those seeds were planted in me that I was not going to be poor, that we were going to go forward, and it was going to happen. God was going to make this work. Things, like I said, went pretty well, but all of a sudden, after about 4 years, there was Donita came in to the picture. And Donita, I believe, was brought to First Mennonite Church for me. And I don't care what anybody says, it's fact. She was. I had never heard what she had to say, ever. She started talking about my words being positive, about praying in faith, about believing what was going to happen. And the only words that were ringing through to me were the words of somebody, my mother, saying, it's going to happen. And Donita, I believe, she through God, and she'll say that, and it's true. I needed her. She brought me in. She told me about the school. I'm sure she thought I was a freak because I would just go and sit in her office, sitting in a chair, and I mean, my eyes would be, my mouth, everything. What? I'd never heard about this. What do you mean? What do you mean we have the power and authority? We have the same power and authority that Jesus had. I'd never heard about that. And also, pastors would tell me, oh, it's okay to be poor, because that's what the pastor of the church said. It's okay. God's going to bless you because you're struggling financially. There wasn't any extra in my pocket, that's for sure. And so I started to believe it. And Donita said, no, that's not how it is. God doesn't want us poor. So I started going to church, went 3 years, and got to know the Berries, got to know just what it was like with the faith walk. The authority of the believer changed my life. It was the first class I took, and if you haven't read that book, I would read it, because it was life-changing for me, and I was a goon. I didn't know anything about this, and it was eye-opening for me. It is a great book. Just to know that we have the power and the authority. And again, another seed was planted. God used Donita to bring me to school, which school changed my life. We were in a counseling class. Again, I was having panic attacks. And we were in a counseling class, and Pastor Bob said to us, if you can't counsel yourself, you're never going to be able to counsel anybody else. I thought, well, that's stupid. Sorry. I loved you, just going to tell you. But I thought, what? Why? How can I counsel myself? And honestly, I believed I was fine. I was okay. Panic attacks, I didn't know why I was having them, but I felt like everything was fine. And he told us that, I don't know how many people took that class with counseling. Did you take it, Vince? Did you take it? So we had to write a paper. So I went home, and I'm using this stuff because it was a stressful time. I went home and went through my life, and I bet I ripped up pages, and I'll tell you, I was cursing you. Because I couldn't get past it. I could not get to the truth. So I would gloss over stuff, and then it was like, oh, this is not the truth. It isn't the truth. What is in my life that's holding me back? Why can't I say what happened to me? But I kept it so deep, I didn't even really know what the heck went on. So I prayed, and I just said, God, release me, and I remember falling on my face and saying, something's got to happen. I'm either going to die with these stupid panic attacks, or I got to be healed from this. So I wrote it. It is the most difficult paper I ever wrote in my life. But there was a cleansing. And there was a release. And it's what I needed. As much as I hated it, and as much as I was fighting it, I knew I had to have it. Ephesians 4:1. Therefore, I, a prisoner for serving the Lord, beg you to lead a life worthy of your calling. For you have been called by God. I knew I was called by God. I knew I had a mission, and I knew I had to be healed before that mission would grow. That was the most difficult paper, as I said, but it was the biggest paper that it changed my life. It got me forward. I was able then to talk to parents that have been through sexual assault. I was able to understand what they went through. I wasn't pushing them away or pushing them out the door, because it's a fact. If we cannot, you're not stupid. If we cannot counsel ourselves, then we can't counsel anybody else. So we have to be healed of the burdens that we have before we can move on. And I was stuck. And so the paper was written. I knew my direction, and I felt at peace. And then crap started hitting the fan. It's been used before. Yeah. So, all of a sudden the church came and said, I'm not really agreeing with everything, and maybe we need to change here, and let's do this. They wanted control of the situation. Donita was there. And I went to Donita. We prayed about it. We went forward in faith, knowing that God was in control of this situation, and I needed to go forward. So that was just kind of the beginning. Rob lost his job. He was laid off. So our income went to zip. He wasn't fired, but he was laid off. And so it was a huge change in our lives. We had 3 children going to be ready for college. We wanted our kids to have their college paid for. So things were mounting. And God bless my husband, because he never said, throw in the towel. He would say to me, it's just a season, and we're going to get through this. So I thought, okay, well, financially, it'll be all right. Things will work out. Then I had 2 feisty boys that were stinkers, and they worked for me at base. Let me put that in. So all of a sudden, one of them got in trouble. So I went to Donita. Thank you, Donita. And I said, they work for base, and they just got in trouble. I wanted to kill them. Donita said, mercy and grace. Rob wanted to kill him. And she said, this is a perfect opportunity to show your children God's love. Well, I didn't want to be honest. I wanted to beat them with a stick and do awful things. But I knew that's what I had to do. Donita said, you know, sinners sin. We all do. But you move forward. You love them where you're at. And I've used that 100 times, Donita. And you do. You know, there's nobody that has walked through that door that can't say that they've got junk in their life or have had. And the awesome power of God to know that, yes, it is His mercy, it is His grace, and not to judge. Again, another seed for base. Because I have some doozies. Carly can attest to that. Crystal can attest to that. But you know what? I love them. I don't judge. I love them where they're at. I love them. I try to, like God has told me to love them. I may not agree with stuff. I may not like what they're doing. You know, I may look at them and go, "What are you doing?" And that's okay. They know I'm going to speak the truth, but I'm going to speak it out of love. You know, I may first have to smack them a little bit, but you know, they know I love them, right, Car? So, all that stuff I learned because Donita, God used her to come to First Mennonite. And in time, I'll just continue to tell you that in time, they asked, they gave me a choice with First Mennonite, and they told us that we could either stay and they would be in control of the base program, or we had, I think it was a week to leave. And this was during, school actually was pretty close to being over, so that was kind of them. By the way, I've forgiven them, just to let you know. So I got a letter on a Friday night, and the pastor left it on my desk. Didn't talk to me about it, but he left it on my desk. And again, I went to Donita, and I mean, I just cried because I just thought, how can people do this? How can they be so cold-hearted and want that control so badly? And that was a hard thing for me. I have to tell you, our children went through a very difficult time, as my husband did, as did I, with forgiving, with even wanting to step foot in church. And there's still a situation with two of our boys that they still have a difficult time because it hurt our family, and they saw the hurt of a church. We do try to tell them that that's water under the bridge. We've forgiven them, and this was the best thing for us. I didn't know it at the time, but it was. They asked us to leave in May. We left, packed our bags, and we were gone. 1 Corinthians 1:26 through 28. Remember, dear brothers and sisters, that few of us, and that was the same one you said. I'm like, oh, she took my verse. That few of you were wise in the world's eyes, or powerful, or wealthy when God called you. Instead, God chose things the world considers foolish in order to shame those who think they are wise. And He chose those things that are powerless, that would be me, to shame those who are powerful. God chose things despised by the world, things counted as nothing at all, and used them to bring to nothing what the world considers important. Through this walk with Base, we've had a lot of people tell us how stupid we are. Men that were very wise in the world's eyes would tell us, you're never going to make it financially. God can't do that for you. There's no way. You know, you have to be wise when you do things. And I'd go home And Rob would tell me, it's going to be fine, honey. It's going to be fine. Just keep walking. I know, he is a rock. He is a rock. Romans 11:29. For God's gifts and the call can never be withdrawn. So God gave me a gift. He gave me a calling, and it's never going to be withdrawn. And I knew that. Through the meetings, through the negativity, through all those things that were put before us, all it did was make my faith walk, Rob's faith walk, my daughter's faith walk. Our kids, our boys are getting it, made us stronger because we believed to receive. When we were asked to leave, we didn't have a place to go. That was in May. School started in August. I prayed about it. Rob and I went to so many places. Many were dumps. Many needed hundreds of thousands of dollars in work. And we just kept saying no. We went to churches to see if they would be willing to open their doors for us, even if it was just for a season of time. And one night, I was in bed, asleep. I woke up at 2 in the morning. I remember this vividly. And God gave me a name. His name was John. The name he gave me was John Schmickel. I got up and wrote the name down because I thought, I don't want to forget this name. So wrote his name down. At 8 o'clock in the morning, I called John Schmickel and I said, I'm Gayle Westbrook from the base program. He stopped me and he said, I've been praying that you would call me. Who but God? Who but God? We rented the building for a while, a year, and then we decided that we were going to purchase the building. It was $4,500 that we were going to have to pay a month for 9 months, and we knew that, whoa, I was going to be tight on the budget. And Rob had just gotten a job, not what he wanted, certainly. It wasn't his perfect job, but he got it, helped us financial. It wasn't nearly as much as what we had made and were kind of used to, but that was our faith walk. That was when we surrendered. And we both came to the realization that we had to go forward in faith and know that God was in control and pray about it. And this was what God wanted us to do and where he wanted us to be. So we purchased the home, and Proverbs 3:5 says, trust in the Lord with all your heart and do not lean on your own understanding. We didn't understand. Rob is a budget man, and one time he said to me, are we going to be able to make it? And I said, yes. This is what God wanted for us. And never again did he question it. He continued to believe in the program, and he's not a kid person, but I am, and still he supported. He is my rock. You know, he's my one that tells me when things are difficult, push through it. You know, you can get through this. Probably why my mom liked him so well, because she would say that same thing. So there were a lot of things that I had to face, a lot of things that Rob and I had to face and go forward on. I don't want you to feel like that I'm special, that things just came easy to us, because they did not. It was difficult. We had financially, it was hard for us in many situations. In Psalms 32:8 8, it says, I will instruct you and teach you in the way you should go. I will counsel you with my eyes upon you. So that I had to depend on that. I had to trust in him, and I had to know that he was going to counsel me. And that I knew that as he counseled me, that I had faith that Rob and I were going to go in the right direction. Matthew 6:31 through 33. Therefore, do not be anxious, saying, what shall we eat? Remember those times, Rob? What shall we drink? What shall we wear? For the Gentiles seek after these things, and your heavenly Father knows that you need them all. So he knew we needed that stuff. And he knew that, that he was going to provide it. Heavenly Father knows that you need them all, but seek ye first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all things will be added to you. Proverbs 16:3. Commit your work to the Lord, and your plans will be established. These are all scriptures that we leaned on, that we believed in, that we spoke over. It's not an easy walk. It isn't. It hasn't been easy for us. It's still not easy. There's certainly times that arise, but you know what? It's gotten easier. It's gotten easier because all these seeds that have been planted in Rob and in me, that we go through junk. It's just we don't go through junk as long, because we know that God is in control. We know that he doesn't want this stuff to happen to us. We know that we are mighty, and we know that we are overcomers, and we know that the battle's already won. And you know what? The worst thing that the devil could ever do to me is he could kill me, and I'd go to heaven and I'd be fine. So that's the part that I got, that I understood. God's going to take you on paths. You can do like I did before. You can take the easy path, which I did, tried to. Or you can take that path God wants you to take. And that's not always the easy path. But it doesn't make sense, as it said in Scripture, to other people. And people will call you unwise, and they'll call you foolish, and they'll say you're stupid, like I did you. I'm sorry. I probably shouldn't have said that. But at base makes $100,000. That's the max that we've made a year. Almost $55,000. So half of our budget goes to a mortgage. We do payroll. We have 5 employees. I do not at this time take a payroll. Rob and I pretty much believe that at this point in time we aren't going to, against the advice of our attorney and our accountant, but we feel led that that's not what we want to do. To stay on a budget at this point in time, we feel like that's where God wants us to be. It's helped Rob and I stay on our budget at home. It's helped us to be more dependent on God with our finances. We don't take things for granted like at one time we did. So God takes that. We make it is amazing. My accountant, who is not a Christian, looks at my budget and says every stinking year, I don't know how you make it. I don't know how you make it. Except now she doesn't, because now she hears me say, it's not me, it's God's. It's God's plan. It's God's thing. And that's what base is. It's God's. It's not mine. It's God's vision. It's all this stuff that God used in my life. He turned it to the good, and all the junk. Not just pieces of it, but all of it. And I'm here to tell you that, the thing that I would advise is write your paper on your life. Write it down. Burn it when it's done. Ask for forgiveness. You know, Donita said this at our women's luncheon, and it hit me. And she said, God doesn't throw all the answers to us at once. And he doesn't. And he didn't in my life. He takes it step by step. I had to meet certain things. I had to go through certain things. And after I accepted the fact of the sexual assault, then I had to forgive. So who came? Pastor Thad. Pastor Thad came to our church, and he talked on forgiveness. I never dreamt that I was going to be touched by that. And poor Rob, I think he thought I was going up there to forgive him. Because as soon as I came back, he goes, did I do something? But I had to forgive. I had to forgive my assaultant. I had to forgive my father, my earthly father. I had to forgive people in our life. I had to forgive First Mennonite Church, and that was difficult for me. I had to forgive the elders and the pastor of the church that hurt our family tremendously. But I had to forgive because I knew that was going to fester if I didn't go forward and forgive. So, write your own testimony, look at it, and counsel yourself. Ask God to help you through those rough times that we've all had, and know that He is our rock. 60 years ago, seeds were planted in me, and I know God didn't want the garbage to happen to me, but He turned my garbage into His glory. We all have trash. It's how we get rid of it is what matters. Jeremiah 29:11 says, I know the plans I have for you, says the Lord. They are not evil, but to give you a future and a hope. I have a song that I want you to listen to, and I want you to close your eyes. And first of all, I want to thank you all. This is not going to happen every year, praise God. But I want to thank you for supporting our program. It changes lives. And most important, it changed mine. It changed Rob's. So I just want to thank you for your support.